A young officer in Napoleon's army pursues a mysterious woman to the castle of an elderly baron, where he finds signs of witchcraft and the shocking truth about her in The Terror, a 1963 cult horror film produced and directed by Roger Corman. The film stars Boris Karloff and Jack Nicholson, the latter of whom made his feature film debut 3 years earlier in Corman's Little Shop of Horrors. Separated from his regiment during the Napoleonic Wars, Lieutenant André Duvlay briefly comes across a beautiful young woman, Helene.
Wait, you haven't told me your name.
My name's Elaine.
An old woman who seems to live in the forest alone and gives him shelter tells him that he is imagining things. But the young woman intrigues him, and he eventually follows her to Baron Victor Frederick von Lepp's castle. There he learns that the girl he's seen is identical to the Baron's late wife, Ilsa, who has been dead for 20 years. The Baron admits to having killed her when he returned unexpectedly, only to find her in the arms of another man. Duvlay is convinced that the girl is real, however, and sets out to uncover the truth. The Terror is famous for being filmed on sets left over from other American International Pictures productions, including The Haunted Palace. It began when Corman had just finished filming The Raven and had a few spare days, an expensive castle which was about to be demolished after the filming, and a contract with Boris Karloff for 3 films, first of which was Raven. Corman quickly wrote a basic outline of the story and filmed a largely improvised piece with Karloff, Jack Nicholson, who was also in The Raven, and his regular Dick Miller. All of the scenes involving Boris Karloff were filmed by Corman in 4 days, but the finished film, which was largely improvised, required 9 months to complete, the longest production of Corman's career. The castle scenes with Karloff were shot so quickly that Corman didn't even bother to use slates to mark the beginning of shots. Once he just had the actors walk downstairs one after another in succession, figuring he could later cut the single shot into separate shots that he could probably use somewhere. As Corman was busy, the remainder of the film was filmed over a course of 9 months by at least 5 other directors: Francis Ford Coppola, who shot his footage over 11 days, of which approximately 10 minutes is in the film; Dennis Jacob, who also doubled for Boris Karloff in the climactic flood scene; Monty Hellman; Jack Hill, who shot, among other things, a shot involving quicksand in his own backyard; and Jack Nicholson, who had approached Corman to direct some scenes because, quote, everyone else did, and was granted permission. Apart from that, Dick Miller is also rumored to have some directorial input in the film. Corman made The Terror in the midst of a cycle of Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, and considers it an honorary member of that cycle. The previous Poe pictures had ended with the castle or mansion being destroyed by fire, but with this one, Corman decided to change the formula and have the castle destroyed by a flood instead. Noting the abundance of second-unit directors who had worked on the film, 4 to that point, Jack Nicholson requested and received permission to direct the climactic flood sequence himself. While being interviewed for the documentary Corman's World: Exploits of a Hollywood Rebel, Nicholson insisted that the finished movie had no cohesive plotline. He gleefully recounted the scene where his character throws Stefan, Dick Miller, against a wall and threatens him, to which the Stefan character attempts to explain where the story is through ham-fisted, probably last-minute dialogue additions. Nicholson has also noted that he almost drowned shooting a scene in the ocean at Big Sur. He was knocked over by a wave and his uniform almost dragged him down. The uniform worn by Nicholson was previously used by Marlon Brando in Desiree. Nicholson later reflected on the movie fondly, saying, quote, I had a great time, paid the rent, they don't make movies like The Terror anymore. Incidentally, Sandra Knight, who was married to Nicholson at the time, was pregnant while filming with daughter Jennifer Nicholson. The January 2, 1963 Variety announced The Terror as filmmaker Roger Corman's first release under his recent 3-picture deal with American International Pictures. The budget was estimated at $800,000. The film opened on September 25, 1963 in Los Angeles, California, accompanied by another AIP release, Dementia 13. The September 28, 1963 Los Angeles Times recommended the film to, quote, those who can't resist a good scare. House on Haunted Hill is a 1959 American horror film. It was directed by William Castle, written by Rob White, and stars Vincent Price as eccentric millionaire Frederick Lauren. He and his fourth wife, Annabelle, have invited 5 people to the house for a haunted house party, promising to give them each $10,000 with the stipulation that they must stay the entire night in the house after the doors are locked at midnight.
There's no electricity, no phone, no one within miles, so no way to call for help.
Vincent Price was an American actor best known for his performances in horror films, although his career spanned other genres. He appeared on stage, television, and radio, and in more than 100 films. He has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one for motion pictures and one for television. The film also stars Carol Omart, Richard Long, Alan Marshall, Carolyn Craig, Alicia Cook, Julie Mitchum, Leona Anderson, and Howard Hoffman. Exterior shots of the house were filmed at the historic Ennis House in Los Feliz, California, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and built in 1924. The bulk of the film was shot on sound stages, depicting the interior of the house in a combination of styles, including 1890s Victorian, with gas chandeliers and sconces. The poster for the film included an illustration of a house in yet a third style, that of a fanciful 4-story Romanesque structure. The main image in the display advertising showed a woman hanging from a noose with the other end of the rope held aloft by a gigantic grinning skeleton. It also included an image of Vincent Price holding a woman's decapitated head by the hair. In 1959, some newspapers judged the image too gruesome for publication. Exhibitors were encouraged to play this up that the movie was so frightening that even the ads couldn't be shown. The film uses many props used in carnival haunted houses to generate fear and terror. It is best known for a famous promotional gimmick called Emergo. William Castle placed an elaborate pulley system in some theaters showing the film, which allowed a plastic skeleton to be flown over the audience at the appropriate time. When the skeleton rises from the acid vat in the film, a lighted plastic skeleton on a wire appeared from a black box next to the screen to swoop over the heads of the audience. The skeleton would then be pulled back into the box as the skeleton in the film is reeled in. Many theaters soon stopped using this effect because when the local boys heard about it, they would bring slingshots to the theater. When the skeleton started its journey, they would pull out their slingshots and fire at it with stones, BBs, ball bearings, and whatever else they could find. The skeleton that rises from the vat of acid is a real human skeleton. Like most movies, it was simply faster and cheaper to buy a real human skeleton from a biological supply house than having one created by the special effects department. Thanks in part to Castle's gimmickry, the film was a huge success. Alfred Hitchcock took notice of the low-budget film's performance at the box office and set out to make his own low-budget horror film, which became the critically acclaimed hit Psycho. Castle was himself a Hitchcock fan and would try to imitate Hitchcock's work in later films such as Homicidal. Among the cast, Alan Marshall, who played the elegant Englishman among the group hoping to survive a single night in the house, had been a popular supporting actor in the 1930s. His life ended dramatically when he died on stage playing one of Mae West's multiple husbands during a live performance of her play, Sextet. During principal photography, Carolyn Craig, who played Nora Manning, was in the early stages of her pregnancy. Her son Charles was born the following May. Sadly, Carolyn Craig would take her own life in 1970. Richard Long is best known for his leading roles in 3 television series: The Big Valley, Nanny and the Professor, and Bourbon Street Beat. Long had heart issues and passed away in 1974 at age 47. House on Haunted Hill was originally released theatrically by Allied Artists. The release date was February 17, 1959. The picture grossed $2.5 million on an estimated $200,000 budget, making it one of Allied Artists' most profitable films of that period. It is included among the American Film Institute's 2001 list of 400 movies nominated for the top 100 most heart-pounding American movies. A young space alien and a teenage Earthling fall in love and plot to stop the aliens' race from using Earth as a food breeding ground for giant lobsters in Teenagers from Outer Space, a 1959 American independent black and white science fiction cult film released by Warner Brothers. The film was produced, written, and directed by Tom Graff and stars David Love, Dawn Bender, Brian Grant, Harvey B. Dunn, Tom Graff, and King Moody. In the film, a young alien named Derek, played by David Love, abandons his crew to search for new life on Earth, while one of his crewmates is sent to find him as they attempt to eradicate human life in order to farm Earth with giant lobster-like livestock they call gargons, a delicacy on their home world.
Soon this planet will be covered with full-grown gargons.
Derek soon falls for a pretty teenage girl, Betty Morgan, played by Dawn Anderson, and they team to try to stop the plans of his invading cohorts. Teenagers from Outer Space was filmed on location in and around Hollywood, California, with a number of telltale landmarks like Bronson Canyon and Griffith Park, and Hollywood High School giving away the film's hazy locale. One notable aspect of the film is that it was largely the work of a single person, Tom Graff, who in addition to playing the role of reporter Joe Rogers, wrote, directed, edited, and produced the film, of which he also provided cinematography, special effects, and music coordination. Producers Brian and Ursula Pearson and Gene Sterling provided the film's $14,000 budget, which was less than shoestring, even by the standards of the time. According to Brian Pearson, the crew employed many guerrilla tactics in order to cut costs. Director Tom Graff secured the location for Betty Morgan's house for free by posing as a UCLA student. While Graff had attended the school, he had graduated 5 years earlier. The older woman who owned the house even let the crew use her electricity to power equipment.
That's why you came here, wasn't it?
Graff shot in many nearby locations, mostly in the vicinity of Sunset Boulevard and Highland Avenue in Los Angeles, to double as more important city landmarks. Graff's steady hand and framing kept most of the real locations under wraps, creating a great low-budget illusion of a small town.
Much better.
Wait, Betty.
Other cost-cutting ideas didn't pay off as well. The space costumes were simple flight suits clearly decorated with masking tape, dress shoes covered in socks, and surplus Air Force helmets. The use of stock footage in lieu of special effects, and Steven Spielberg-looking shots replacing actual visuals of the invading enemy spaceships seriously undercut the urgency of the ending. Props included a single bolted joint skeleton reused for every dead body, a multi-channel mixer that the producers made no attempt to camouflage, even clearly bearing the label Multi-Channel Mixer MC2 as a piece of alien equipment, and the infamous dime store Hubley Company atomic disintegrator as the alien's focusing disintegrator ray gun. In an unusual practice of the era, Graff also pre-recorded some of the film's dialogue for several scenes, and had the actors learn to synchronize their actions with the sound. The score of the film came from stock, composed by William Luce and Fred Steiner.
We will continue our search in another solar system.
In June of 1958, Brian Pearson, who invested $5,000 in the production with his wife Ursula, took Graff to court in order to gain back the original investment and a percentage of any profits. The Pearsons had learned that Graff had allegedly sold the film, which was not true until early 1959, but heard nothing of their investment or the percentage of profits to which they were entitled. The legal dispute dragged on for a year, and once it was settled, Pearson got his $5,000 investment back, but the judge ruled there was no profit to share. Tom and the Pearsons, who had been good friends during the production of Teenagers, never spoke to each other again. Teenagers from Outer Space opened on June 3, 1959 to negative but not crippling reviews. The Los Angeles Times review of the movie stated, quote, "What a curious little film this is. There are flashes of astonishing sensitivity half buried in the mass of tritisms." And of the director Tom Graff, "When he stops spreading himself so incredibly thin, I think his work will bear watching." The film failed to perform at the box office, placing further stress on an already burdened Graff, and in the fall of 1959 he suffered a breakdown, proclaiming himself as the second coming of Christ. After a number of public appearances followed by a subsequent arrest for disrupting a church service, Graff disappeared from Hollywood until 1964. Sadly, he committed suicide in 1970. Teenagers from Outer Space went on to become a cult classic among sci-fi fans. A mad doctor experimenting with transplant techniques keeps his girlfriend's head alive when she is decapitated in a car crash, then goes hunting for a new body in The Brain That Wouldn't Die, a 1962 American science fiction horror film directed by Joseph Green and written by Green and Rex Carlton. The film stars Jason Evers and Virginia Leith. In the film, Dr. Bill Courtner keeps his fiancee's severed head alive for days, and also keeps a lumbering, malformed brute, one of his earlier failed experiments, imprisoned in a closet. Virginia Leith portrays Jan Compton, and the monster in the closet is played by Eddie Carmel in his first cinematic role. Carmel was a well-known Israeli-born circus performer who worked under the name the Jewish Giant. The specific plot device of a mad doctor who discovers a way to keep a human head alive has been used in fiction earlier, such as Professor Dowell's Head from 1925, as well as other variants on this theme.
My brain's still untouched.
The Brain That Wouldn't Die was shot independently in 13 days around Tarrington, New York in 1959 under the working title The Black Door, but was not released until 1962 due to various legal problems. The budget was estimated at $62,000. The sets for the production were all housed in the basement of a New York hotel.
My eyes are deceiving me.
The movie was picked up for release by American International Pictures and released on May 3, 1962, on a double bill with Invasion of the Star Creatures.
Oh, just fine, Donna. I haven't seen you for quite a while.
The film opened in Seattle in September of 1962 as the theatrical co-feature with Roger Corman's Tales of Terror. The newspaper ad simply listed The Brain That Wouldn't Die title, followed by horrifying, weird, shocking. This double bill played at Seattle's Paramount Theater, a prestigious downtown movie palace. The score, titled The Web, was composed by Abe Baker and Tony Restaino and was noted for creating a sinister mood. The film is known for some glaring factual errors. For example, even if it's possible to keep a severed head alive by ensuring enough oxygenated blood is circulating through the brain, as it appears to be here, it would still be impossible for Jan to speak without lungs or vocal cords. And common sense will tell you that when somebody is performing an operation, say an open heart surgery, or more specifically in the film, they're performing an operation to stimulate the patient's brain, the doctor or doctors will get blood on them. Amazingly, Dr. Courtner comes out of the operation room spotless, as do the other doctors and nurses, as well as the patient.
I should have known he was as good as dead when they wheeled him in.
Not surprisingly, the low-budget, quickly shot production has received its share of bad reviews. Author and film critic Leonard Maltin awarded the film 1.5 out of 4 stars, calling it poorly produced. On his website Fantastic Movie Musings and Ramblings, Dave Sidelair gives the film a mostly negative review, noting that although it managed to work up a certain amount of tension and featured some good gore effects, it was ruined by its lack of likable and intelligent characters and its, quote, inability to decide just how it wants to be taken. Brian J. Dillard from AllMovies said of the film, hokey, overwrought, and poorly paced, this venerable creature feature still commands a sizable following on the basis of its campy, low-grade special effects, its TNA exploitation, and its many pseudo-philosophical soliloquies. TV Guide awarded the film 2 out of 4 stars, calling it one of the most generally bizarre brain movies. Reportedly, Virginia Leith hated the film so much she refused to return for post-production. At least a few of her lines were dubbed by Doris Brent, who played a nurse.
Dr. Cortner.
Despite the negative reviews, The Brain That Wouldn't Die remains a cult classic among sci-fi and horror fans. In 1906, on a train racing through Siberia, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing are engulfed in nightmare when a frozen missing link comes to life in Horror Express, a 1972 Spain-United Kingdom horror film directed by Eugenio Martin. The film also stars Telly Savalas and Sylvia Tortosa.
And where evil is, there is no place for the cross.
Horror Express was filmed in Madrid between 1971 and 1972. Produced on a low budget of $300,000 with the luxury of having 3 familiar genre actors in the lead. The film was co-produced by American screenwriter-producer Bernard Gordon, who had collaborated with Martin on the 1972 film Pancho Villa, which featured Savalas in the title role.
There wouldn't be something valuable in there, like gold.
Gold? It's a laboratory specimen.
Martin made Horror Express as part of a 3-picture contract he had with Philip Jordan, and Savalas was under contract with Jordan as well. The film was a co-production between Spain's Granada Films and the British company Benmar Productions, who made Psychomania. The train interior sets and the train model used for the exterior shots were the same sets used for Pancho Villa. The film had the train station sequences shot at the 1880 Railway Museum in Madrid, designed by Gustave Eiffel. During production, there was only one set available for the interior of the train cars. All of the scenes for each car had to be shot at once, and then the set would have to be reconstructed for the next car.
Is this number 8?
That's next door, Wells compartment.
The locomotive which pulls the train in that scene is an REN-FE 141F, but later in the film, miniatures are utilized for the exterior shots of the train going by camera and for the climax in the end. Securing Lee and Cushing was a coup for Gordon, since it lent a certain atmosphere reminiscent of Hammer film productions, many of which starred both of the actors. However, when Cushing arrived in Madrid to begin work on the picture, he was still distraught over the recent death of his wife, and announced to Gordon that he could not do the film. With Gordon desperate over the idea of losing one of his important stars, Lee stepped in and put Cushing at ease simply by talking to his old friend about some of their previous work together. Cushing changed his mind and stayed on.
Rubbish. A conjurer's trick.
Like all Italian and Spanish films of the period, Horror Express was filmed mostly without sound, with effects and voices dubbed into the film later. Lee, Cushing, and Savalas all provided their own voices for the English market.
It may be my fault. I asked the baggage man to take a look. I was curious.
It was no concern of yours.
Everybody's under arrest!
Telly Savalas was paid $22,000 for his short stint on this movie. Producer Bernard Gordon was delighted to get him for such a low price. Savalas was equally delighted, as he used the cash to get a 7-year lease on a West End apartment for his then-girlfriend. According to Eugenio Martin, most of Telly Savalas' dialogue and performance was improvised.
He knows that a murderer has 2 arms, but still, the devil must be afraid of one honest Cossack.
Horror Express generally received positive reviews.
Wait! There's something more.
The film was first released as an officially selected film of the 1972 Sitges Film Festival on September 30th. Director Eugenio Martin won the Critics' Award Best Script for this film. According to Martin, his native country of Spain was where the film fared worst, both critically and in terms of box office revenue. The film was received more positively in other markets where the audience was more familiar with low-budget horror films, such as Great Britain, the United States, and Australia. I was a bit surprised myself at the film's popularity overseas, but it didn't really do a great deal for my subsequent career, said Martin.
Miss?
The film's acclaimed musical score marks the debut of John Cassavetes as a film composer, who broke into the film industry thanks to his friendship with Telly Savalas. Cassavetes would later create the music for Savalas' TV series, Kojak. Frequent airings on television throughout the 1970s and 1980s helped Horror Express to gain a devoted cult following amongst horror fans.